All right, Michael, do you have anything you would like to ask us first, or do you want us to start?
No. I think
Okay.
Just so everyone knows, the reason why I suggested that I answer your questions first is that your first question is about the practice of self-inquiry, which is the very core of the teachings. It's all the teachings are just spokes around that one central point, which is the practice of self-inquiry. So I think that's a very good place to start.
Okay, the question is, how is one to practice self-inquiry while participating in daily life?
Right, okay. I think it'd be useful to split this into two parts. First, how to practice self-inquiry, and then how to practice it in daily life. Probably you all have some idea about the practice of self-inquiry, but if you don't mind, I'll just go over it again, because it is the core, the central point of the whole teachings. Firstly, about the term self-inquiry, the terms that Bhagavan used were well, he used many terms, but the terms he most commonly used were the Sanskrit term Atma-vichara and the Tamil term Tannatam, both of which mean self-inquiry, but in the sense of self-investigation. I think self-investigation is a better translation, because inquiry can give more of an idea of, inquiry can mean investigation, but it can also mean asking questions. And because of this association of inquiry with asking questions, and because Bhagavan sometimes presented his teachings seemingly in the form of questions, who am I, to whom are these thoughts, etc., people often confuse the questioning with the investigation. Questioning may be useful for turning our attention back towards ourselves, but merely asking the question, who am I, or to whom are these thoughts, that is not the self-investigation. Self-investigation is when we turn our attention back towards ourselves to see what we actually are. Now we each experience ourselves as a person. As a person consists of a body, and it's always that we never experience a dead body as ourselves, so it's a living body. So body, life, mind, intellect, and will. These five are what are in Advaita, they're generally referred to as the panchakosa, or the five sheaths. Bhagavan often said, ego is nothing but the thought or false awareness, I am this body. But what he meant by body is not just the physical form, but all the five sheaths. He says in verse 5 of Uludunapadu, Uru Panchakosa Uru, that the body is a form composed of five sheaths. Therefore, all five are included in the term body. So when Bhagavan talks about ego being the false awareness, I am this body, what he means by body is all these five collectively. That's body, life, mind, intellect, and will. That is what we now experience as ourself. But we who now experience ourself, that is, what experiences itself as these five, is not our real nature. It's only as ego that we experience ourselves as these five. And though they're five, though we can classify them as five things, we experience them all collectively as ourselves. So in effect, they're a bundle that we experience as ourselves. But we who now experience these five sheaths as ourselves are, it is as ego that we experience them as ourselves, because our real nature is just pure awareness. And in the view of pure awareness means awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So in the view of our real nature, what we really are, there is no person, no body, mind, intellect, or any of these things. There's nothing, there's just pure awareness. But we have now risen as ego, and whenever we rise as ego, we experience ourselves as a person consisting of these five sheaths. these in verse, but the nature of ego is to always cling to things other than itself. That is, though we now seem to be this person is not what we actually are. We are not this body, we are not the life, we are not the mind, we're not the intellect, we're not the will. We are that which is aware of all these things. So in verse 25 of Ulludunaptu, Bhagavan describes ego as a formless phantom. And he says, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. Grasping and feeding on forms, it flourishes. Leaving one form, it grasps another form. But if sought, it takes flight. So such is the nature of ego. When he says grasping form, what he means by form is any object. That is, ego is not a form, because ego is not an object. Ego is the subject. So everything that we're aware of, all the phenomena that we're aware of, they are objects, and what Bhagavan refers to as form. So when he says ego comes into grasping form, it comes into existence, what he means is ego, as soon as we rise as ego, we grasp a form. The first form we grasp is the form of this form of 5 sheaths, the body or person that we now seem to be. So we first grasp that as I, and then through the 5 senses, we project the world, and we spend most of our waking and dream stage attending to things other than ourselves. That attending to anything other than ourselves is grasping, is what Bhagavan means by grasping form. And it is by attending to things or being aware of things other than ourselves, but as he says, grasping and feeding on form, ego flourishes. So, or he said flourishes greatly. So it is by attending to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing ego. But if we, as he says in that verse, tedinal otum pidicum, that means if sought, it takes flight. That is, if we turn our attention back to see who am I, this ego who now experiences this person as myself, well, he says it takes flight, it disappears. Why is that? Because ego is just a formless phantom. When he says it's a formless phantom, that means it has no form of its own. Though it cannot rise without grasping a form as itself, it has no form of its own. And when he says it's a phantom, he means it has no substance. So the ego is wholly unreal. But we seem to be ego so long as we are looking away from ourselves, looking at anything other than ourselves. So long as we're attending to any form, we seem to be ego. But if we try to look at ourselves to see what we are, this ego is not, we cannot find any such thing as ego. So it is turning our attention, what self-investigation is turning our attention back towards ourselves to try to see what we actually are. And ourself doesn't mean any phenomena. We are not an object. We have a subject. So it is trying to put it metaphorically, we're trying to see the seer or perceive the perceiver or know the knower. So self-investigation is not attending to any object. It's attending to that which is aware of all objects. Though ego is not what we actually are, it is not anything other than what we actually are. This is best illustrated by an analogy. If we mistake a rope to be a snake, the snake is not anything other than a rope, but it is not what the rope actually is. But if we want to get rid of the snake, how can we get rid of that snake? If we take a stick and start beating it, it's not going to die. The only way to kill that snake, because it's not a real snake, the only way to kill it is to look at it very carefully. When we look at it very carefully, what do we see? Oh, it's just a rope. Then, in effect, the snake is killed. Likewise, if we look at ourselves carefully enough, that if we turn our attention within and attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will see, but we are not the ego that we now seem to be. We are just pure awareness. And as soon as we see ourselves as pure awareness, ego will be destroyed. And then this identification with ourselves as a person will come to an end, because as I said at the beginning, it's only as ego that we identify ourselves as a person. So self-investigation means trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves. And to the extent to which we turn our attention towards ourselves, we are thereby withdrawing it from all other things. And eventually, when we're able to attend to ourselves keenly enough, we will thereby cease to be aware of anything else. And then we will experience ourselves as pure awareness. And at the moment we experience ourselves as pure awareness, ego is destroyed and the story is over. I mean, we've achieved what we set out to achieve. But it's not really an achievement. Bhagavan often said, there's nothing to be gained in this spiritual path. But what we are seeking is what we already are. So what people call realization or enlightenment or jnana or whatever is not something we are going to newly acquire. All that is required is to give up the false identification. So in the spiritual path, we are not going to gain anything. We're going to lose everything. But when we lose everything, what remains, that alone is what is real. So it is not as a person that we attain self-realization, or not as an ego that we attain self-realization. What is called self-realization is nothing but the annihilation of ego, the state in which we just remain as we always actually are. But when we try to turn our attention back towards ourselves, we at once find there's an internal resistance. That is, nothing can actually stop us. Nothing external to us can stop us from attending to ourselves. But we ourselves are not yet willing to attend to ourselves keenly enough. Why are we not yet willing to attend to ourselves keenly enough? Because we still have strong desires and attachments. We're still very attached to the person that we seem to be. And the whole life of this person, all our family, our friends, our whole identity, we are so attached to that, we are not yet willing to let go of that. So it seems to be a struggle to turn our attention back towards ourselves, because the nature of ego is that is, as ego, the very nature of ego is to attend to things other than itself, because we cannot exist as ego without grasping form. That means without attending to forms, objects, things other than ourselves. So when we're trying to turn our attention within, we are, so to speak, swimming against the current of the ego, of the mind. The natural flow of the mind is to go outwards, towards things other than itself. We are now trying to turn it back within. So because of our unwillingness to, or our lack of sufficient willingness to surrender ourselves completely, we find it a struggle. And this is natural. And this is why Bhagavan said, the only way to succeed in this path is by patient perseverance. So how easy or difficult it seems to be all depends upon the strength of our, to the extent that we love to know ourselves, to that extent it will be easy. But we will love to know ourselves to the extent to which we're willing to let go of everything else, because we can't know ourselves and have other things. It's one or the other. We either know ourselves as we actually are, which is pure awareness, or we are aware of other things. So we have to make this choice, and every moment we are faced with this choice. Either we can attend to other things or we can attend to ourselves. So if we are serious about following this path, we should be trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves as much as possible, even though we'll find we're up against a lot of internal resistance. That internal resistance is not, it's we ourselves, our lack of willingness, the strength of our desires and attachment, that's what makes us unwilling and makes it seem difficult. We can explain this with an analogy. If you've got a big balloon, and or one of these big beach balls or something, and you try to push it under the water, if you try to push it, it'll pop up this way or it'll pop up that way. It'll always be resisting. So long as it's pumped full of air, it's not possible to push it very far underwater. You can push it little by little, but not very far. But if the air starts leaking out, the less air pressure there is inside, the easier it will be to push it deep inside. Likewise, for our mind to sink deep within, the air that fills the mind, so to speak, is all our desires and attachments. To the extent to which our desires and attachments are weakened, to that extent we will be able to go deep within. Bhagavan used an analogy in Nana, in the text Who Am I, of a pearl diver. He said, just like a pearl diver ties stones to his waist and then dives within the ocean to get the pearl lying at the bottom, we have to tie the stone of vairagya and sink deep within. Vairagya means freedom from desire. So to the extent to which we are willing to let go of all our desires and attachments, to that extent we'll be able to go deep within. But in practice, most of us still have strong desires and attachments, which is, it's okay. I mean, we can, if you're going on a journey, you can only travel from the point at which you are now. So if we have desires and attachments, it doesn't matter. So long as we want to try to follow this path, slowly those desires and attachments will drop off if we persevere in this path. So we are trying to turn our attention gradually back towards ourselves. Some people find it useful to spend some time, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes or however long, sitting with eyes closed or lying on their bed with eyes closed or whatever, trying to turn their attention within. That can be beneficial because when our mind is not engaged in other things, it's easier to make the effort to turn within. But so long as we have strong desires and attachments, even if we're sitting with our eyes closed, trying to turn our attention within, this struggle will be going within. We'll be trying to turn within, and our desires will be trying to pull our mind outwards. So sitting for long hours in meditation was not something that Bhagavan recommended. What he recommended is throughout the day, repeatedly trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves. So now it comes to the question you asked: is how to practice in day-to-day life, while participating in daily life. In the midst of whatever, we all have so many commitments, so many things that we have to be doing. I mean, according to our destiny, we may have a job, or we may have family commitments, or we'll have commitments of some sort or other. So generally, we all live a more or less a fairly active life. But in the midst of whatever sort of life we are living, if we look at our mind carefully and see what we are thinking most of the time we are thinking unnecessary thoughts. That is, if we're driving our car to work or catching a bus to go to work, or if we're walking to the shop or something, our mind won't be attending to what we are doing. I mean, even when driving a car, most people when driving a car, only a little bit of their attention is actually on the action of driving the car. Sufficient attention is on that. The rest of the attention they'll be thinking about their holiday they're going to go on, or problems in the family, or problems at office. There'll be something or other. Most of the time we're spending thinking about things which are not actually immediately necessary for us to think about. Even if we are working in an office and doing whatever work we do, a lot of our attention, some of our attention obviously has to be on the work, but a lot of our attention will be thinking other thoughts. So instead of thinking other thoughts, if we are really interested in knowing what we actually are, we can be spending that time, but we would normally be spending attending to other thoughts, attending to ourselves. So to the extent to which we have real interest and enthusiasm to know ourselves, to that extent, it will be possible to be carrying on this practice, even in the midst of our daily activities. An analogy I sometimes give to illustrate this is, supposing a very close friend of ours was had an accident and was in hospital in a critical condition. So much our mind would be so much thinking about our friend. Are they going to survive? If they come out of coma, will they be able to resume activities? Will they be paralyzed, or will they be able to walk again? Will they be suffering brain damage? So many worries will be there in our mind, and we'll be thinking about our friend so much. So even if we're at work, we'll be carrying on our work as usual, but a lot of our attention will be thinking about our friend. Why is that? Because that friend is so dear to us, we think so much about them. If we were so interested to know ourselves as we are concerned about our friend who's in hospital, we would be able to spend most of our time attending to self, even in the midst of other activities. So it is possible, but we should imagine we can, but it's easy to start off, but we can be doing it, we can be constantly turning our attention back towards ourselves. It is a struggle, because we have strong desires and attachments, and we have so many cares and interests and concerns about things other than ourselves. We have to slowly wean our mind away from all its concern, interest, and desire for things other than itself. So this practice, it's a slow process. In one verse that Bhagavan translated from the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, slowly, well, the word in Sanskrit is sane sane. In Tamil, Bhagavan translated as mella mella. That means slowly, gently, little by little, turn the mind within and fix it in yourself. That is basically the teaching. So that is a very important clue to the practice. We have to take a gentle but persistent approach. Slowly, we have to cajole our mind to turn it within. Bhagavan sometimes used to say, when comparing this path to other spiritual paths, particularly the path of yoga, he said, paths like the path of yoga, where you're forcibly trying to control the mind, that is like if a cow has escaped from its shed and has wandered off and has found some nice place to go and graze. If you want to bring it back to the shed, if you run after it with a stick and try and chase it, if you try to chase it back towards the shed, you'll just run around in a circle and run some other direction. So however much you chase it, it's not going to go back to the shed. Bhagavan said the practice of yoga and a lot of spiritual practices are like that. You're forcibly trying to force the mind back to its source. That is not a very effective way of doing it. It's much more effective to take a nice bunch of green grass and slowly tempt the cow back to its shed. Likewise, in this path of self-investigation, we're slowly trying to cajole the mind back to turn back within. So this is a gentle path, but it's a path we have to, persistence is necessary. If after some time you get bored, the cow's coming too slowly, so you get bored, and you think, oh, let me go home, but you're not going to get the cow back to its shed. You have to be patient. You have to slowly cajole the cow back to its shed. Likewise, this mind, we have to slowly cajole it to turn back within. So in practice, for most of us, most of the day, we'll be attending to things other than ourselves. But if we are serious about this practice, if we're often trying to turn our attention back towards ourselves, it will slowly become more natural to us. We'll remember more often to try to turn our attention back towards ourselves. And when we turn our attention back towards ourselves, we may not be able to hold on to that self-attentiveness for very long, because it's, as I said, it's like trying to push that fully inflated beach ball under the water. It pops up again one way or other. So the mind, as soon as we try to turn it within, our desires and attachments will again drag us outwards. That doesn't matter. Even if it's just for a few moments we're attending to ourselves, a few moments here and a few moments there, they add up. And slowly, slowly, the frequency with which we remember to turn our attention back towards ourselves, and the keenness with which we're able to attend to ourselves, that will slowly, slowly increase. So, Marty, I hope that adequately answers that question. But if you've got anything...
It does. It does it very well. The next part of this is what I see, feel, touch, hear, taste, a mental projection, a dream, or an uncaused appearance of the self, or something else.
Okay. According to Bhagavan, it's all a dream. And a dream means it is a mental projection. So a dream and a mental projection are one and the same thing. That is, while we are dreaming, we see a dream, we experience ourselves as a body in a dream world. And it seems to us that that dream world, I mean, when we're dreaming, it seems to us that we're awake. So the world seems to be something other than ourselves. And it seems to us that that world is existing other than ourselves. But actually, nothing that we perceive in a dream exists independent of our perception of it. How the dream world is created, merely by our seeing it. Bhagavan says this world is exactly the same. Merely by our seeing it, this world is created. This is a very difficult teaching for many people. It's an easy for us to understand. It's difficult for us to accept, because we are so deeply ingrained in, that the belief that this world exists independent of our perception of it is so deeply ingrained in us. And there is a reason why the world seems to be real. The world and the body are all just our own mental projections, so they are not real at all. But we now experience this body as I. What is actually real is only I. But because we experience this body as I, this body seems to be real. And since this body is a part of this world, the whole world seems to be real. That's why when we are dreaming, the dream body and dream world seem to be real. It's only when we wake up that we're able to recognize that they're just our own mental projection. How are we able to recognize that they're unreal as soon as we wake up, even though they seemed real while we were dreaming? Because so long as we were experiencing that dream body as I, it seemed to be real because I am real. And consequently, the whole world seemed to be real. But when we wake up, our identification with that dream body is severed. We no longer experience that dream body as I, so the dream world no longer seems real. So, but now we experience this body as I, so this world seems to be real. So this is what Bhagavan taught us. Bhagavan taught this for a very good reason, because so long as we take this world to be real, take this world to be anything other than a dream, our mind, it's easy for us to get well, it's difficult for us to free our mind from attachment to it. But the more, the stronger our conviction, or the more we are willing to doubt whether this world has any reality independent of our perception of it, whether it exists independent of our perception of it, it will be easier for us to free our mind from attachment to it. The other term you used is an uncaused appearance. Well, it is an appearance, but Bhagavan never said it's an uncaused appearance. I know this term, I know where this term uncaused appearance comes from. This is a term that David Godman coined in Be As You Are. In one of the chapters, he tried to explain ajata. which is a particular, I'll say a little bit more about ajata. He said ajata is seeing the world as an uncaused appearance in the self. That is not actually what ajata means. According to Advaita, the world is a mere appearance. And it doesn't exist independent of our perception of it. The teaching that the world is an appearance is what is called Vivartavada. Vivarta means appearance, a false appearance, an illusory appearance. And Vada means contention. So the contention or the teaching that the world is just an illusory appearance, which is the basic teaching of Advaita, is called Vivartavada. Ajatavada is beyond that. Bhagavan said ajata is not actually a teaching. Though Bhagavan said his experience is ajata, it is not something to be taught, because according to ajata, there is no world, there is no appearance at all. That is, nothing has ever come into existence. That is the final state. That is now this world, the whole of this world or any other world in any dream exists only in the view of ourself as ego. So long as we seem to be ego, whatever world we are currently perceiving seems to be real. But when we investigate ourselves, we will see that actually there never was any such thing as ego. Since there never was any such thing as ego, there never was any world. So the ultimate experience is ajata. That is not, ajata doesn't accept that there's any appearance at all. There never was any appearance according to ajata. So, but what Bhagavan taught us is Vivartavada, that the world is just an illusory appearance, and he explained Vivartavada by what is called Drishti Shrishti Vada. That is, the Drishti Shrishti means Drishti means perception or seeing. Shrishti means creation. So most scientific, religious, and philosophical views of the world are what are called Shrishti Drishti Vada. That is, they believe first there's creation and then we perceive it. That is, the world exists prior to our perception of it. That's what most people believe, whether they're religious people or scientifically minded or even philosophers. Most philosophers believe the world exists independent of our perception of it. That is what Bhagavan called Shrishti Drishti Vada. But what he taught is Drishti Shrishti. That is, there's no Shrishti independent of Drishti. There's no creation of the world independent of our perception of it. It's only by perceiving it that we create the world. So this is what Bhagavan taught us. But for many people, it's difficult to accept this. So sometimes Bhagavan would dilute his teachings. For example, if anyone came to Bhagavan and said, oh, the world, there's so many problems in the world, there's so much injustice, I want to work to solve the problems of the world. Bhagavan used to say, he who has created the world knows how to look after it. Leave it to him. You mind your business. But so there he's coming down to a level of Shrishti Drishti Vada. He's accepting as if there's a God who has created this world. But that is because of the level of mind of the questioner. But for those of us who want to go deep into his teachings, what he taught is Drishti Shrishti Vada. He told us that the ultimate experience is ajata. But that is not for teaching, because in ajata there's no one to teach and nothing to be taught and no one to be taught. But so because we now experience ourselves as ego, we mistake this body to be I and we perceive a world. So to say that there is no world is not useful for us now. What is useful is to say, yes, the world seems to exist, but it seems to exist only in your view because you see it. If you investigate yourself, then you will see the unreality of the world. That's what Bhagavan taught us.
That's pretty well put.
That actually makes sense. Next question, is a guru necessary? Need he be alive? It feels like Ramana is my guru. Can this be true?
Well, I'll answer the first one first. Yes, it is certainly true. But the answer to the other two questions, yes, so long as we rise as ego, guru is necessary. And yes, guru must be alive. But being alive doesn't mean being a living body, because guru is not the body. Though guru appears in human form, the human form is not what the guru actually is. Bhagavan often used to say, God, guru, and self are one and the same thing. That is, self here means our real nature, what we actually are. Because we now have limited ourselves, we seem to be a small person in a vast universe. We are not experiencing ourselves as we actually are. So we think there's some power, great power must have been there to create this universe. So we think there's some power beyond this universe. We may say that power has created it, or that power is guiding it, or that power is the source from which it has come. But that power is what we conceive of as God. But where this world has actually come from is nothing but from ourselves. So what we take to be God is nothing but our own real nature, but God seems to be something other than ourselves because we have limited ourselves. So on the path of spiritual, as we develop spiritually, if we are not at all developed spiritually, we will not be concerned about God. We'll not be concerned about anything except this material world. We'll just be concerned about trying to fulfill all our desires as much as possible in this spiritual world. We won't even be guided by morality or ethics. Whatever, if I can find some way of satisfying my desires, that's sufficient for me. I don't have to bother about other people. That's the crudest state of mind to be in. Slowly, slowly, the mind develops, and we begin to develop ethics, and we begin to have morality, and we are concerned about others. We don't want to harm others. And as the mind matures, that we begin to see through the, we no longer believe in that the physical world is the only world there is. We begin to recognize that there's something beyond the material world. So that is where religion starts. And you have got, I mean, not all religions are God-centered religions. Buddhism and various Jainism and various forms of Hindu philosophy even are not God-centered. But they all religions, sorry, there seems to be an echo. All religions, there's something beyond the material world. So that's the state of mind where devotion to God comes in. But most people who worship God, who go to temples or to mosques or to synagogues or to churches or Buddhist viharas or whatever, they go for the fulfillment of their worldly desires. They go and they pray to God, take care of me, take care of my family, take care of those I love, and people pray for they are worshipping God for the sake of what they hope to gain from God. So God is not an end in himself, he's a means to an end. That's at a certain stage of spiritual development. But as the love for God increases, we no longer love God just for the sake of the things we get from God. We love God for his own sake. And then we begin to come to the spiritual path. We are seeking God. We want to know what is God. But God is not actually anything outside ourselves. But because our mind is turned outwards, it's necessary for God to appear in human form to tell us the God you are seeking is within you. Turn within and know yourself, then only you can know God. So Guru is necessary, because without the Guru's teachings, we wouldn't turn our mind within. But the nature of the mind is to go outward. It's only after we come across the Guru's teachings, that we begin, I mean, Bhagavan, for example, taught us, we are all seeking happiness. But the problem is we're seeking happiness in the wrong places. We're seeking happiness outside ourselves. We think we're going to gain happiness from better circumstances in life by having more money or a better job or a nicer house or a better car or a nicer family or whatever, or better friends. We always think our happiness is dependent on things outside. But Bhagavan says there's no happiness in any of the things of the world. Happiness is your real nature. Happiness lies within you. So that is the function of a guru, to turn the outward seeking mind into an inward seeking mind. So guru is absolutely necessary, but guru need not be, but guru is not, though guru appears in human form, guru is not the human form. So though Bhagavan is our guru, but though Bhagavan, I mean, most of us were not even born when Bhagavan left the body. But that doesn't mean Bhagavan is not our guru, because his teachings are always available. And not only his teachings, there's the story of his life. And I mean, for many people, even just seeing a picture, many people are attracted to Bhagavan. The first thing that attracted to Bhagavan was just seeing a picture of him. So Bhagavan can attract people in so many ways. So though his body is not physically present now, he's still working as effectively as when he was in the body. Even before he was in the body, he was still working effectively, because Guru is not, though Guru appears as a person, Guru is not a person. Guru is eternal. Guru is our own real nature, which has been guiding us slowly through so many lives, that through so many dreams, to bring us to the stage of spiritual development that we are now. And now it has appeared in the form of Bhagavan to tell us what you are seeking lies within you. Turn within, and there only you can find the happiness you're seeking. So yes, Guru is absolutely necessary. Guru must be living, but not living temporarily. Sadhu Om used to say, yes, living guru is necessary, but if what you mean by a living guru is a living body, then that living guru will one day become a dead guru. What's the use of such a temporarily living guru? We want an eternally living guru. Bhagavan is the eternally living guru. So if you feel Bhagavan is your guru, that is 100% true.
Well, that's good. And thanks for the confirmation. And I imagine it must have been really amazing working with Sadhu Om back in the days. But anyhow, let's get on to the next question from Dan. I just read your Happiness and the Art of Being, that mind, speech, breath, and body activities will come to a complete standstill when fully self-attentive. When fully self-attentive. Can you elaborate? Yes,
that is the context in which this subject arises. That is, in yoga, they try to restrain the mind by restraining the breath. And Bhagavan has said, yes, that is a way. You can, to a certain extent, you can restrain the mind, because mind and breath, breath means the life, they both arise from the same source. So to the extent that if supposing some you hear a very shocking news, you say, it took my breath away. Because at that moment, you're so stunned, your mind doesn't go anywhere. You're stunned, and your breath also stops, briefly. So mind and breath, the activity of the mind and the breath are very closely related. If a person is in a very emotional state, very agitated, they'll be breathing rapidly. Whereas if a person is calm, they're in a calm state of mind, their breathing will be calm. So yoga takes advantage of this and tries to calm the mind by restraining the breath. But Bhagavan has said it's not necessary for us to do this, because if you turn your attention within towards I, automatically the mind will calm down. That is because the activity of the mind is all outward going. So when we're turning the mind back within, automatically it calms down. And to the extent that the mind calms down, the breath will also calm down. When we go very deep in the practice, the breathing and the activity of the body will reduce to a very considerable extent. And in the case of Bhagavan, when he had his death experience and he turned his attention within, so keenly that for about 20 minutes, his body was actually lying there lifeless. It's not well recorded in many books. Like in many books, it says Bhagavan enacted death. He lay down like a corpse and enacted it. It wasn't a matter of enactment. Bhagavan, when the fear of death came, what Bhagavan wanted to know is, okay, this body is dead. With the death of this body, am I also going to die? So because he wanted to know whether I would die along with the body, he left the body as if it were a corpse and he turned his attention within. And he turned his attention within so keenly that thereby he experienced himself as he really was, and he thereby merged forever in his source. That is not Bhagavan, but the ego that had took that body, Venkataraman, to be I, merged forever in its source, and what remained was Bhagavan. But from the onlooker's point of view, because Bhagavan sometimes related his life from the onlooker's point of view, his body was lying lifeless for about 20 minutes. But because that body had a destiny to play the role of guru. I mean, Guru had a destiny to be a vehicle through which guru would function. After about 20 minutes, suddenly, there was a shock and the body came back to life. The ego that previously took that body to be I, that ego had died, and what from then on shone through that body is Bhagavan. That is our own real nature, the true eternal guru. Several times in the next, that happened when Bhagavan was 16 years old. During the next 16 years, Bhagavan later said, it happened occasionally. Sometimes he would just inward drawn, but his body would become lifeless. But it was witnessed only on one occasion in 1912, when he was about 32. That was about 16 years after his death experience. He had gone with a devotee called Paraniswami. They had gone to a temple on the northeast side of the hill, where there was a tank. And a tank means like a pond. So they'd gone there and they'd had a bath there, and they were returning in the hot sun. And at one point, Bhagavan sat down, and Paraniswami thought maybe he's feeling faint. But then Bhagavan sat on a rock and his body became lifeless. So Paraniswami embraced him and was weeping, thinking that Bhagavan had died. And after some 15, 20 minutes, suddenly Bhagavan came back to life. In most books, that is recorded as that was Bhagavan's second death experience. But in later years, Bhagavan clarified that was the last death experience. But what had happened first on that day in Madurai, when his body died for 20 minutes, that happened many times. But, I mean, we don't know how many times, but Bhagavan said it happened several times between then and that day when on the it's called the rock on which he sat is called ātma-vicāra, because ātma-vicāra means tortoise rock, because it's shaped like a tortoise. That incident on ātma-vicāra, that was the last time it happened, and it was the only time it was witnessed by someone else. So, but I mean, that is, we're now talking about Bhagavan after what happened in Madurai. That was the final. That was the end of the story. But it's just that what happened to his body several times after that was a similar thing. But if we are able to turn our attention within very, very deeply, for example, I mean, obviously this won't happen if we're driving our car or walking to work or standing in a queue to catch a bus or something. But when we have time to set aside and to try to go deep, if we turn our attention very keenly towards ourselves and keep our attention steadily fixed on ourselves, the breathing will subside and come almost to a standstill. But as soon if we notice it, then it will at once start again, because if we notice it, our attention has gone away from ourselves back towards the body. So we won't notice it. So it's not a very significant thing, but it's just something that happens. That just as if you restrain the breath, you will restrain the mind. If you restrain the mind, you will restrain the breath. And by turning our attention back towards ourselves, we are thereby restraining the mind, the outward going activity of the mind.
Can I clarify that?
Yes.
If I understand it correctly, you're saying that the breath will slow down as we become more and more self-attentive.
Yes.
Towards the source. Are you saying that the breath will come to a complete stop? Does that mean the entire physiology comes to a complete stop? The heartbeat, everything comes to a complete stop?
In Bhagavan's case, that is what happened. But
okay.
It's important to understand all this is only in the view of the onlooker, not in the view. If we turn our attention within so keenly, but we become aware of ourselves as we actually are, it may seem to be onlooker, but the breathing stops, or it may or may not. It doesn't matter. From our perspective, that is, we will be lost forever in pure awareness. We will merge forever in pure awareness. So for us, there will be no body or world or anything. There'll be just pure. As Bhagavan described in one verse in Upadesundaya, if one knows oneself, then what remains is Anadi, Ananta, Akhanda, Satchidananda. Anadi means beginningless. Ananta means endless or limitless or infinite. Akhanda means unbroken. Satchidananda means Sat is being, or what actually is. Chit is awareness, and Ananda is happiness. That's our real nature. So when we know ourselves, there will only be that infinite, eternal Satchidananda and nothing else. So everything else is said, like when we say about Bhagavan's body was dead for 20 minutes and then it came back to life, that's from our perspective. Bhagavan said the body and mind of the jnani exist only in the view of the ajnani, not in the view of the jnani.
Right. And so in that context, we are creating Ramana or projecting him into being.
Yes.
And his words and his wisdom and his teaching is really our wisdom, if you will, coming through Ramana. We're projecting him into life, but Ramana really is absorbed in the absolute.
Yes. That is, most of the things that we project are a projection of our vasanas.
Sure.
But Bhagavan, or not even the outward form of his teaching, but the clarity which comes through his teaching, the love that is manifest through the human form of Bhagavan, that is a projection of the reality within us.
Right. It's
our own real self.
That is coming, the truth is coming.
Yeah. Sometimes Bhagavan said, but once Bhagavan, someone had, in the 1940s, someone brought a radio and installed it in the old hall. And so sometimes it was switched on for music, if there was some Carnatic music recital or something, or sometimes when it was during the wartime, people would switch it on to listen to the news or something. So once when the radio had been on for a while, Bhagavan said, see, from this radio, we hear this singing coming. But if we open it up and look inside, we won't find anyone singing there. The singing is coming from some other source. Sure. And he said, likewise, if you open this body, you'll find no one inside. It's coming from some other source. That's what he said on one occasion. On another occasion, when someone asked him, Bhagavan, you say that you have no mind. Then when we ask you questions, where are the answers coming from? Bhagavan said, from the same source from which the questions arise, the answers also arise.
Great. And if you guys don't mind, I'd like a elaboration on spiritual practice and the self-inquiry that you gave us.
Yes.
First, I want to say this analogy of the balloon with the air is really powerful for me. So thank you for that. I think vairagya and viveka, releasing the air so that we can sink even deeper is a very, very powerful analogy.
So how do we release the air?
Yeah.
The air, as I say, is our vishaya vasana, all our desires and attachments. We release the air by patient and persistent practice. That is, the more we practice, the more the balloon will become deflated.
Yeah, that's great. I've never heard that, but that's really good. Just to follow up to that, I've read in, I don't know if it's Viveka Chudamani or the Advaita Bodha Deepika, the importance of nididhyasana and even samadhi for the purification of the mind and and getting the balloon smaller, I guess. But you also said Ramana did not advocate long periods of meditation.
Yes.
So what about nididhyasana and samadhi in terms of spiritual?
Okay. Nididhyasana, it's a term that's used, that is, there are three terms that are used together: Sravana, Manana, and nididhyasana. Sravana literally means hearing, but it means coming to know the teachings. So if we are reading Bhagavan's teachings or we are listening to people talking about Bhagavan's teachings, that is Sravana. Manana is thinking deeply about it, making connections. I see making connections between different parts of Bhagavan's teachings and making sense of it all. That is manana, that's the thinking. Nididhyasana literally means deep contemplation. So in Bhagavan's path, the nididhyasana is the self-inquiry, the self-investigation. So yes, it's by the self-investigation that we gain the viveka and the vairagya. Regarding samadhi, samadhi is not a term that is native to Advaita philosophy. It's a term imported from yoga. But in old days, there were many different systems of philosophy in India. They've been broadly classified as 6 systems of Astika philosophy and 6 systems of Nastika philosophy. The Astika philosophies, or so-called orthodox philosophies, were the ones which were accepted the authority of the Vedas. And the Nastika ones were those that didn't accept the authority of the Vedas. Like, I think 4 of them are 4 schools of Buddhism and Jainism and Charvaka, which is materialism. So there were actually many, many different systems of philosophy. They're generally classified into these 12 groupings. And there was a lot of interaction between these different philosophies. So, and a lot of competition, so to speak. So because everyone was trying to argue in favor of their own philosophy, if you're arguing with your opponents, you've got to take on board their ideas. And you don't have to take their ideas as they are, but you have to talk in their language. So, but in this way, the term samadhi got imported into Advaita. So in Advaita text, you do sometimes read about samadhi. But the idea is that the samadhi that you can gain by yoga practices, you can also gain by self-investigation. That's basically the idea. But the term samadhi is a very, it's it's a term without any very precise meaning. There are different types of samadhi are classified in texts, and there's so many different different schools of thought have different theories about samadhi. But basically, Bhagavan said the only real samadhi is what he called Sahaja Samadhi. Sahaja Samadhi means natural samadhi. And Sahaja Samadhi is nothing but our own natural state of pure awareness. Bhagavan said that is the only samadhi worth seeking. And though he talked about that as that is Sahaja Samadhi in that sense is the goal, but he also in one or two places, he talked about the practice of Sahaja Samadhi. In his introduction to his Tamil translation of Drikdasi of Viveka, he talks about the constant practice of Sahaja Samadhi, Sahaja Samadhi Parakatal, he says, and he describes it as constantly looking within. So in other words, this practice of self-investigation is the practice of Sahaja Samadhi. In yoga, the type of samadhi that is achieved by yoga, Bhagavan said that is just manolaya. That is a sleep-like state of temporary dissolution of mind. And Bhagavan said you cannot progress spiritually while in that type of nirvikalpa samadhi, because it's just like it's just like however long you sleep, you don't wake up with any of your vasanas destroyed. And to illustrate this, Bhagavan used to tell us a story. There was once a yogi who was living on the banks of the Ganga, and was practicing some form of yoga, and his mind was subsiding into samadhi. And he had a disciple who was taking care of his bodily need. And one day when he woke up from samadhi, he was feeling thirsty. So he asked his disciple to go and fetch water for him. So the disciple went to the Ganga to fetch water, and when he came back, the yogi had again gone into samadhi. And he had gone into samadhi, such deep samadhi, but his breathing and all his metabolic functions came almost to a standstill. And he remained in that state of samadhi for 300 years. And in those 300 years, in the meanwhile, the Ganga had changed course. And but when he woke up from samadhi, the first thing he asked was, "Where's my water?" he asked angrily. So Bhagavan said, the last thought was in his mind was the first thought to pop up. So that means none of the vasanas were destroyed. So Bhagavan said, going into that type of nirvikalpa samadhi is just a cul-de-sac. It's a dead-end route. You're not going to get anywhere. So Bhagavan said, for those people who practiced yoga, Bhagavan said, before going into such nirvikalpa samadhi, you should turn the mind back within, back towards I, because it's only by turning the attention towards I that you can bring about manonasa, which is the destruction of the mind. Manolaya is just a temporary dissolution of mind. It is a complete dissolution of mind, like in sleep, but it's only temporary. So whether sleep is brought about by tiredness, coma may be brought about by a car accident or something. General anesthesia is also a state of manolaya. Nirvikalpa samadhi is a similar state brought about by various yogic practices, but it's spiritually of no benefit. But you don't reduce the strength of your Vishaya vasanas while in nirvikalpa samadhi any more than you do in a coma or in sleep or in swoon or anything.
Thank you so much. I think I can talk to you all day, but
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, that's what we're here for. I mean, this is why I started with Martha's question. Is I thought it's best to start with the core of the teachings, because if we first clarify about the core, then other things fit into place much more clearly.
very true. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, the next question is from Rosemary. Can realization occur in an instant, or is it always accompanied by a revelatory experience such as lots of light and or a trance-like state for minutes or hours or longer? And whether or not it's instantaneous or revelatory, is it ever complete, or is there a continuum of deepening and heightening?
Okay. Nowadays, many people talk about realization, about enlightenment, and many teachers have different ideas about what realization is. So many of the people nowadays who are teaching some form of their own interpretation of Advaita or whatever, or any other spiritual practice, they may have had some experience which they take to be realization. But what realization means well, realization is not actually a term that Bhagavan used for you. Sometimes Bhagavan used to joke about the English term realization. He said, our real nature is always real. There's no need to realize it. The problem is we have now realized what is unreal. So we don't have to realize what is real. We have to unrealize what is unreal. So this term realization is not the most appropriate term. The term that is generally used is jnana. Jnana means pure self-awareness. That is the attainment of a state of pure self-awareness or self-knowledge, atma-vichara. It's also sometimes referred to as moksha or mukti, which means liberation. That means liberation from, well, ultimately it means liberation from the ego. But not only nowadays, but even in the past, there have been so many different schools of thought have different ideas. I mean, generally all, the goal of all forms of Indian spirituality, whether Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, they all have some idea about nirvana or liberation in some form or other. But the understanding of the term is understood differently in different places. Bhagavan in Uludu Napadu refers to, wait a second, I'll just, in the final verse of Uludu Napadu, Bhagavan says, if it is said that liberation that one will experience is of three kinds, with form, without form, or with or without form, I will say, no, but the destruction of the ego form, which distinguishes with form, without form, or without form, alone is liberation. So there's so many different ideas people have about liberation or realization or whatever. But according to Bhagavan, realization is nothing but the destruction of ego. And there are only two possible, if we are aware of ourselves as anything other than what we actually are, we who are aware of that are ego. So we can either be in the state of ego or in the state where we're aware of ourselves as we actually are. There's no halfway in between. So if we understand realization in the sense in which Bhagavan meant it, then it can happen only instantaneously. The preparation for it, it takes time. I mean, we have to be practicing this self-investigation and self-surrender for a long time, but that is all preparing the ground, so to speak. But when actually we manage to turn our attention back a full 180 degrees towards ourselves, so to speak, that is away from all other things, back towards ourselves, so we're aware only of ourselves, ego will be destroyed in an instant. So realization is always instantaneous. Some people talk about experiences of light or all sorts of things. But these are these are anything like light or such things. These are all phenomena. And that which is aware of phenomena is ego. So long as we are aware of anything other than pure awareness, that is, we who are experiencing that are ego. So if we have an experience with lights or divine sounds or whatever, that is not the destruction of ego. So that is not realization in the sense in which Bhagavan meant it. But as I say, not only now, but in the past also, there are so many different ideas people have about what the spiritual goal is. If we want to follow Bhagavan's path, we need to understand what is the goal he is talking about. For Bhagavan, the only goal is the annihilation of ego, because ego is the root of all problems. It's only when we rise as ego that we experience ourselves as a body, see a world, and consequently we have so many problems. But the root of all problems is ego. In verse 26 of Ulladu, Bhagavan says, he summarized his teaching very forcefully in verse 26 of Ulladu. He says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego does not exist, everything does not exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, know that investigating what this ego is alone is giving up everything. That is, in the previous verse, he said, if you investigate it, it takes flight, it disappears. So if you investigate what this ego is, you're thereby giving up ego and thereby giving up everything. So all phenomena seem to exist only because we have risen as ego. So long as we are experiencing phenomena of any kind whatsoever, so long as we experience anything that appears or disappears, anything that is not permanent, we are still in the state of ego. We are not in the state of realization. So the vast majority of people who claim to be realized, or in some sort of, whatever state they're in, it is not the state of egolessness that Bhagavan talked about, that Bhagavan taught us as the true goal of spiritual, of the spiritual path. So, and once we attain that annihilation of ego, who is it who attains it? No one. That is, but one who is seeking that is ego. So when we, the seeker, ego, are destroyed, what remains is what always exists, which is pure awareness. Anadi Ananta Akanda Satchidananda, beginningless, endless, infinite, unbroken Satchidananda. That is what alone remains there. So there's there's no deepening or heightening or anything. That is as it is, as it always is, and it is immutable. It never undergoes any change whatsoever. That alone is real. Whatever undergoes any change of any sort is not real. Bhagavan defined reality as that which is eternal, unchanging, and self-shining. What is eternal, unchanging, self-shining is only our fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. So being aware of ourselves as we actually are, that is the final goal. And when we attain that, it's not even that it's something newly attained. Bhagavan says it's beginningless. Once we attain that, we will realize that we were always in that state and we had never risen as ego. So I hope that answered that question adequately.
Yeah, it does, but it kind of makes it very elusive too. You know, I notice when I'm doing self-enquiry, sometimes I'll inquire who the inquirer is, you know, and because you're just so busy getting to that nothingness, you know, and then suddenly it's like, well, who's trying to do this? Who's trying to become enlightened? Who's trying to become nothing? Who is it that's trying to become nothing?
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like that balloon deflates for a moment or a few moments.
Yeah.
And there's just total peace, you know, and then eventually it's going to start filling back up with air, you know. And so it's hard to even, especially with a lot of the things you've been saying this morning, it's hard to, you can't conceptualize that place that Bhagavan is talking about.
Yeah. It's
because it feels like if you get there, there's nowhere. There's nothing. There's no one to cognize. There's no one to.
Well, yes, except
one to even experience that experience that we're trying to get to.
Yes. Well.
So it, you know.
Yeah. What experience is that? Is the nature of the reality is pure awareness. So what experience is pure awareness is only pure awareness. That is what we actually are. So it is not as ego or as a person that we will experience that. It is. And
that's what's hard to grasp.
Yeah, it can't be grasped because it's a state beyond the mind. We can only think in mental terms. But if we understand the unreality and insubstantiality of all mental things, then we will not be concerned about. It will not be something fearful we will be willing to let go of all these things, because sometimes it's referred to as a state of nothingness. But Bhagavan said it isn't actually a state of nothingness; it's a state of infinite fullness. Mm-hmm. Because what is absent in that state is only all these unreal, that ego and phenomena, they are absent in that state. But ego and phenomena are insubstantial. They have no reality at all. So, as he said, it's a matter of unrealizing the unreal, and what then remains, that alone is real.
Right. Thank goodness for perseverance.
Yes, well, that's the only one. I mean, and it does seem daunting at first, but as we go deeper and deeper into the practice, the trust in Bhagavan and the trust in his teachings deepens, because when we're turning our attention within, we are experiencing more and more clarity. And as we experience more and more clarity, what previously seemed something fearful or something undesirable becomes is no longer fearful. It is, we recognize that is what alone is real. That is what is alone is worth achieving, because ultimately that is the state of infinite happiness. And what else do we want but happiness?
You ready for the next question?
Yes.
This comes from Mana, and there's 3 questions here that are all related. So, why is the spiritual pursuit difficult? What is the importance of the mountain Arunachala? I get that Bhagavan says it's Shiva himself, but what does that mean?
Right, okay. I'll start with the first question. Why is the spiritual pursuit difficult? According to Bhagavan, it's extremely easy. Why it seems difficult is because we are not yet willing to let go. We're not yet willing to surrender ourselves. So long as we have desires and attachments, trying to turn our attention within seems to be difficult. But if we patiently, slowly, gently persevere in the practice, it will become easier and easier. But, well, even say it becomes easy, the difficulty is always there, because the deeper we go within, the more resistance there is. So it will always seem to be difficult until finally we are willing to surrender ourselves completely. And then we will find, Bhagavan sometimes said, obviously he didn't mean this literally, but he sometimes said, a time will come when we will laugh at all the effort we made. But what appeared so difficult will be found to be so easy. Because what can be easier than knowing ourselves? Why we don't know ourselves? Because we're not yet ready to let go of our false identification with other things. So that's why it seems difficult. So it's because of the strength of our desires and attachments, it seems difficult. But if the more we follow this path of self-investigation and self-surrender, the more love we will have to turn within, and the more, to the extent we have love to turn within, our desires and attachments will be weakened. So the love to turn within will be strengthened, the desire to go outwards will be weakened. And it will, thereby we'll be able to go deeper and deeper within, until eventually we will lose ourselves in our source and remain as we always actually are. So that's the first question. About the importance of Arunachala, Bhagavan said, so long as we experience ourselves as a form, we cannot experience God as formless. If we want to experience God as formless, we need to experience our own real nature, which is formless. And then we'll find that God is nothing other than ourselves. So because we have limited ourselves as the form of a body, it is appropriate to worship God in form, because we can't know God as formless until we know ourselves as formless. So it is appropriate to worship God in form, and God and Guru also. Just like Bhagavan is the human form of God and Guru for us, Arunachala is the same God and Guru in the form of a mountain. Bhagavan very explicitly in some of the verses in his 5 hymns to Arunachala, he explicitly refers to Arunachala as his Guru. In one verse he sings Giri Uruvahiye Kirupe, the next verse. Kutra Mutraritene Gunamai Panital Guru Uruvayali Arunachala. Arunachala, shine as my Guru, destroying all my defects and giving me all good qualities. Defects means the rising of ego. Good qualities means just being as we actually are. So, but for Bhagavan, Arunachala was Guru. And in another verse, he reveals what Arunachala taught him. He says, Tirumbiya handane dinamaha kankan terium indranaya Arunachala. That is, turning within, daily or constantly see yourself with the inner eye, it will be known. Thus did you teach me, my Arunachala. So obviously Arunachala didn't teach Bhagavan that in words. What Arunachala teaches through silence. So what Arunachala taught, Bhagavan was able to understand the silent teachings of Arunachala, and what Arunachala taught through silence, Bhagavan has taught us through words. So Arunachala is God and is Guru. So when Bhagavan said Arunachala is Shiva himself, he means Arunachala is God himself. But just like Bhagavan appears to us in a human form, but he is not actually that form. He is the formless reality. But so long as we take ourselves to be a body, that body is what seems to us to be Bhagavan. So Arunachala is also Arunachala and Bhagavan are one and the same. So our own self has appeared outwardly in the form of Arunachala and in the form of Bhagavan, to act as Guru, to turn our attention back within. So Arunachala is, when Bhagavan says Arunachala is Shiva himself, he means it is God, and God is nothing but our own real nature, what we actually are. So what appears outwardly in the form of Arunachala is our own real nature. And why it appears in the form of a hill, in order to turn our attention back within. So Bhagavan revealed that Arunachala, this form of Arunachala, has an extraordinary power to turn the mind back within. So that is the importance of Arunachala. In one verse, I'll find it just a minute. in one of the 5 hymns, Arunachala Patikam, that's the 11 verses to Arunachala, what Bhagavan says in the 10th verse, the meaning is, I have seen a wonder, the magnetic hill that seizes or forcibly attracts the soul, subduing the mischievous activities of the soul who thinks of it even once, pulling or dragging or attracting that soul to face towards itself for one, peerless, infinite awareness, and thereby making it achala, motionless like itself. It consumes that sweet soul as bali. Bali means food that's offered in sacrifice. What a wonder is this, O souls, be saved by thinking of the great Aruna hill, this killer of the soul, who shines in the heart. Implies it shines in the heart as I. So Arunachala has this extraordinary power. If we think of it even once, it will slowly be working within our mind to subdue that mischievous, what he refers to here as mischievous activities of the soul, is the outward going activity of the mind, and he will draw it us within to face himself. Himself means Arunachala is shining in our heart as I, so he turns our attention within, and thereby he makes us motionless. So we can constantly see in the Arunachala Stuti Panchakam, the 5 hymns that Bhagavan wrote to Arunachala, he's constantly blending the seeming devotion for an outward form with devotion for turning within. Because though he's referring to Arunachala, the great Aruna hill, he says it shines in the heart. So he's both referring to the outward form and to the reality of Arunachala, which is what is shining in our heart as I. And he refers to Arunachala here as the killer of the soul. Ivwe Koli Arunamagiri, that is Arunachala, the killer of the soul. That is what is very, in Hinduism, there are many forms of God, but each form has its own speciality. Like there's certain temples, if you go to, people go to them because they believe, like there's a temple in Andhra Pradesh called Tirupati, Venkateshwara, that he is believed to be the god of wealth. So if you want wealth, you go and worship Venkateshwara. And if there are obstacles in your life, you worship Ganesha, the Ganapati, and he will remove your obstacles. So every name and form of God has some speciality. The speciality of Arunachala is destruction of ego. In the very first verse of Arunachala Aksharam, like Bhagavan says, Arunachala mena hamenene paba ahatebe rarupai Arunachala. O Arunachala, you root out the ego of those who think of you in the heart, or those who think of that Arunachala is I. It can be interpreted in 2 ways. So the speciality, I mean, the sole purpose of Arunachala is to destroy our ego.
I think you answered my next question already, which was like, okay, so was Arunachala more special than any other hills around? And so you kind of, because if it's all a dream and all a projection, then it's all the same. So then why is one hill better than another?
Yes, it's all a dream, it's all the same, but don't you think Bhagavan is in some way special?
Yes.
Yes.
But is that, yeah.
So just like Bhagavan is special, for us Bhagavan is special, for Bhagavan Arunachala is special. So since Arunachala is special for Bhagavan, Arunachala is special for us. There are other holy mountains. One of the holiest mountains is Mount Kailash in the Himalayas. But Bhagavan used to say, whereas Mount Kailash is the abode of Lord Shiva, Arunachala is Shiva himself. That is, Arunachala is as far as I know, there is no other mountain that is worshipped as a form of God, not just as an abode of God, but as God in the form of a mountain. So it's most forms of God because people usually relate more to human form. Most forms of God are human. That is Krishna, Rama, Jesus. These are all God in a human form, which for most people is more easy to relate to. Arunachala is a very abstract form. To worship a mountain as God is it's a very abstract form to give to attribute to God. But what a mountain is something that is motionless. So it is and also silent. So it is representing, it is an outward symbol of our real nature, which is motionless, pure awareness. So we cannot adequately, the question you've asked, what is the importance of Mountain Arunachala? And what does it mean when Bhagavan says it is Shiva himself? We cannot adequately answer these questions because we can only answer with our mind. But what Arunachala actually is something beyond the mind, beyond all name and form. There is something special about this hill, but we cannot adequately explain it in rational terms. But one thing we can see is the great love that Bhagavan had for Arunachala. So if we want to understand what is special about Arunachala, it's only by love that we will find it out. So many of us would never have been attracted to Arunachala if it were not for Bhagavan. But we've been attracted to Bhagavan and we have love for Bhagavan. The more our love for Bhagavan deepens, the more we will come to understand his love for Arunachala. That's, I think, the limit of what I can say.
Did you personally have, what was your personal experience of Arunachala yourself, if you don't mind?
Well, for 20 years, it was my home. I used to walk around Arunachala almost every day for most of the time I was there. Except towards the end when I was sick and I wasn't able to. But most of the time I was, for years I was going around every day. And I just felt a very close affinity with Arunachala, which as I say, I can't explain in words, but Arunachala is very special, but it's not something that we can rationalize to a certain extent, but we can't, any rational answer is not a very deep answer. We can understand Arunachala only by, in one verse in Aksharamlai, Bhagavan sings, like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. So for Bhagavan, Arunachala is the form of love. So the only way to truly understand Arunachala is through love. By surrendering ourselves completely to Bhagavan, we will discover the secret of Arunachala. Because Arunachala is nothing but our own real nature. So only when we know ourselves as we actually are, will we really know Bhagavan, will we really know Arunachala.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is from Jody Cleary. Please speak about the concept that I am not the doer. And along with that is, please speak about the concept that everything is perfect and we cannot err.
Right. When we rise as ego, we always experience ourselves as a body and mind. And so whatever actions are done by the body or mind, we experience as being actions done by us. I am sitting, I am talking, I am listening, I am thinking, I am all actions of body, speech, and mind are experienced by us as actions done by ourselves, because the body, speech, and mind are experienced by us as ourselves. So when it is said, I am not the doer, that means that I am not this, that is all the actions of body, speech, and mind, they seem to be actions done by us, so long as we experience ourselves as this body, speech, and mind. But the body, speech, and mind are not what we actually are. What we actually are is just pure awareness, in the view of which there is no body, speech, or mind at all. So as pure awareness, we are not the doer. But as ego, we are the doer. Well, we seem to be the doer because we identify ourselves with the instruments of action. Actually, all actions are done only by body, speech, and mind. But because of our identification with them, we seem to be the doer of actions.
Thank you.
We cannot give up the sense of doership so long as we experience ourselves as this body and mind. So it's only by investigating ourselves and experiencing ourselves as we actually are that we can give up this sense of doership. And the sense of doership always is accompanied by the sense of experiencership. So long as we have a doer of actions, we also experience the results of those actions, the fruit of the actions. So all that we experience, whatever happens to us, whatever we experience in this lifetime is the fruit of actions that we've done in previous lifetimes. So in order to give up the doership and the experiencership, we need to investigate ourselves and know what we actually are. Regarding the other thing about the concept that everything is perfect and we cannot err, everything is perfect, because actually there's only one thing. What actually exists is only pure awareness, and pure awareness is always perfect. However, we have now risen as ego, and as rising as ego is itself the first error. Our rising as ego isn't real. If we investigate ourselves, we'll find that we have never risen as ego, so we have never erred. But now it seems to us that we've risen as ego, but we are experiencing this body and mind as I. So this is a great error. So we have erred, and everything seems to be imperfect. If we look outwards, all seems to be imperfect. But it's all imperfection, including our rising as ego, is just an appearance. So the reality that lies behind this, the appearance of all this imperfection is perfection. But to experience that, we need to turn our attention within and experience ourselves as we really are.
Thank you, Michael. That makes sense. And when I've heard these things said previously in context, it always sounded as if they were really talking about our perception of the world.
Yes. Well,
I understand.
Look at the world. Is the world perfect? If we look at the world, we see so many imperfections. We see greed, egoism. We see birth, death, disease. All these things. There's so many. There's nothing perfect about the manifestation. If we want to find perfection, we have to look within ourselves. And when we look within ourselves and find perfection within ourselves, then we'll find everything is perfect. But we first have to find the perfection within ourselves. But there's another way in which another context in which it is said everything is perfect. That is, whatever we experience in our life, we experience so many pleasures and pains, so many seemingly good things happen in our life and seemingly bad things. Bhagavan's path is not only the path of self-investigation, it's also the path of surrender. And on the path of surrender, we have to accept everything as the will of God or Guru or Bhagavan. Whatever we experience in this lifetime is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. But we have done so many actions in the past and accumulate a vast store of fruits. From the vast store of fruits that we've not yet experienced, God or Guru selects for each lifetime which fruits are to be experienced in this lifetime. So whatever we experience in this lifetime is not only the fruits of our past actions, it's the fruits of our past actions selected by Bhagavan for our benefit, for our true spiritual benefit. So whatever happens in our life, whether seemingly good or seemingly bad, it's all actually for our good. So in that sense, everything is perfect. Nothing that can happen in this world, even all the difficulties and the sufferings and everything we undergo, it's all perfect in the sense that it's all been ordained by Bhagavan and being the most favorable circumstances for our spiritual development.
Okay,
So that's another level at which, or another perspective in which we can explain the statement, everything is perfect.
okay, thank you. That's also helpful, because I've always had the impression people were talking about the world when they said that, or the
No,
steaming
no.
world. So I understand you to say that Guru, God, Atma, our self, our real self,
Yes,
selects the experiences we create in this world for us to learn to annihilate the ego.
exactly.
Thank you.
In other words, everything is conducive to surrender, because what is called annihilation of ego, another term for it is surrender, complete giving up of ego. So the sole purpose of our life and the sole purpose of everything we experience in this life is to leading us towards or preparing us to be willing to surrender ourselves completely.
Thank you. Perfect.
Okay, the next question is from Ted Henry. Why do so many teachers of non-duality often still teach, speak, and publish using dualistic language?
All language is dualistic. That is because language developed to communicate. For us to communicate between each other. If there was no other person, there'd be no need for any language. So language is developed for the purpose of communicating. And what do we communicate about? We communicate about phenomena. So we talk about all language. Bhagavan wrote a small verse saying questions and answers are possible only in this in the language of duality. In non-duality, there are no questions or answers. So inevitably, all language is dualistic. But what the real guru, a real guru like Bhagavan, is talking about that which is beyond duality. But since he's talking in words, he can only use dualistic language. So often Bhagavan talks metaphorically. So we shouldn't take Bhagavan's words just at the surface. We shouldn't take the surface meaning of the words. We need to understand what the words are referring to, what the words are pointing at. So we have to. Bhagavan's words are very important, but we have to see his words are pointing to that which is beyond words. So we shouldn't just get caught up in the words. We have to see what they are pointing, what they are pointing at.
Michael, I'd like to thank you very much for that. I'd like to piggyback on Jody's question, if I could, because it's been on my mind for several years now, and that is where she was asking about, is everything perfect, that we cannot err? I really appreciated your answer. If you could expand upon where I'm coming from with my understanding, and I don't know if it just came out of thin air that was correct or incorrect, it feels right to me that everything that seems to be imperfect in the world, in myself, everything that seems to be a mistake caused by others that affects me negatively, or caused by me that affects another negatively, all of it is perfect in that it serves as a nudge, as a catalyst to ask me to look within for self-investigation.
Yeah.
So I know you already addressed it one way, but am I on the right path in holding that near to myself?
Yes. everything that happens to us, we should accept as the will of God or will of Bhagavan for our own good. We have to be a little bit careful about one thing. Some people misapply this and they justify wrong actions, saying, "Oh, it's all the will of God" or whatever. That is wrong. We are responsible for our actions. We need to act in an appropriate manner. We need to when we're engaged in action, basic ethics, basic morality, and particularly the principle of ahimsa, not harming others. That is very, very important. So we shouldn't try to justify wrong actions by saying, "Oh, all is I cannot. All is perfect. All is the will of God," because that is just giving a license to our ego to act in whatever way it wants. Bhagavan, that is, to answer this more fully, I need to talk a little bit about the karma theory as taught by Bhagavan. It's not the theory, the law of karma as taught by Bhagavan. That is, how karma is created. There are said to be three karmas. There's agamya, sanchita, and prarabdha. Agamya is the actions we do driven by our own will. It is agamya that creates fruit. So if we do an action according to our will, that produces a certain fruit. The fruit of those actions we don't experience in this lifetime. They get stored in sanchita. Sanchita simply means a heap or a store. So the store of the fruits of past actions. And from that sanchita, for each lifetime, Bhagavan selects certain fruit that will be most beneficial for us to experience in this lifetime. So what the fruit that he selects for us to experience in this lifetime is called prarabdha. That's destiny or fate. So though everything that happens to us is according to destiny, not all the actions we do are according to destiny. Some actions are according to destiny, because if we are to experience certain supposing, just for a simple analogy, supposing it's our destiny to be a doctor. In order to be a doctor, we have to study, we have to pass exams, we have to qualify, and we have to practice as a doctor. So the actions that are necessary for us in order to experience our destiny, those actions are driven by prarabdha. But while some of the actions of our body, speech, and mind are being driven by prarabdha, at the same time, our own will is driving our actions. Sometimes our will is in accordance with prarabdha. It's my destiny to become a doctor, and I want to become a doctor. So my studying to be a doctor is driven both by my destiny and also by my will. But I may also want to become not only a doctor, I may also want to become a politician. So I may stand for election, I may make all sorts of effort. But if it's not my destiny to be a politician, I'm not going to become a politician. So we are free to experience what is not in our destiny, or to avoid experiencing what is in our destiny. We're free to that, and we're also free to try to avoid what we're destined to experience and to experience what we're not destined to experience. Though we can try, we cannot succeed, but only what we are destined to experience we can experience. So it's very important to understand, this is where it's related to the question you've asked, the actions of our body, speech, and mind are to some extent being driven by destiny. That is, we are made to do those actions that are necessary. If it's our destiny, for example, to have an accident, we'll make an error of judgment and we'll cross the road at the wrong time and we'll be hit by a car or whatever it is. So there's certain actions are driven by destiny, but our will is also interfering all the time. So long as we rise as ego, we have a will, we have likes and dislikes, and we cannot distinguish which actions are driven by destiny and which actions are driven by our will. And many actions are driven by both. So we can't say to what extent they're driven by destiny, to what extent they're driven by will. So what we need to do, we need to keep a curb on our desires, our likes, our dislikes, and so on. If we're keeping a curb on our desires, we will not be acting the actions we do will be to a large extent according to destiny and not according to our likes. That is, to the extent we curb our likes and dislikes, to that extent our actions will not be driven by those likes and dislikes. So on the path of surrender, we are trying to surrender ultimately we want to surrender ourselves to God. But in order to surrender ourselves to God, we need to begin by surrendering our will to God. We cannot wholly surrender our will to God without surrendering ourselves to God, but we need to begin surrendering our will. We need to begin giving, that is, keeping a curb on our likes and dislikes, our desires and attachment, and preventing these likes and dislikes and desires and attachment influencing our actions. To the extent that we curb these likes and dislikes, the actions will be going on according to destiny.
But isn't Maya, isn't destiny even, isn't karma, including destiny, isn't that all Maya?
Yes, it is. But what is Maya? Maya is nothing but our own mind. So all this is our own mind. Yes, it's all a creation of our own mind. But just like we experience certain laws of physics, it is Maya. The whole physical world is Maya. But if you jump up the top of a tall building, you're going to die. There is certain within Maya, there seem to be certain laws. So we can't go against the laws of Maya, just like we can't go against the physical laws. There are also spiritual laws. Or that's a law of karma. In a sense, we can call it a spiritual law. So the law of karma, though it's operating within Maya, it's still, what happens within the realm of Maya is constrained within the law of karma.
Thank you. I really appreciate your in-depth answers to everybody's questions. And I want to preface my second question, and then you can move on with a quick answer. It's okay, because time's running for me. I wrote this second question pretty much in a lighthearted way. I assume, maybe it's my arrogance, that I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear your answer to it. Because even though it's a lighthearted question, it also has a tinge of deep significance to me. The question is, if all mind, body, thought, and action is but a dream, then whose dream is it when two or more people are discussing the subject of non-duality, such as you and me right now?
Right. Okay. This is actually a very important question. It's not it's a very good question. In a dream, we could be having a discussion in a dream about non-duality. I mean, actually, if our mind is constantly on this subject during the waking state, it's very probable that during dream we'll be talking these sort of ideas with people. While we are dreaming and talking to people, we may be discussing Bhagavan's teachings with a friend or something. And sometimes even the friend may say things and say, oh, yes, that's a new way of looking at it. It may seem to us that we are learning from the friend. But when we wake up, who were we discussing with? We were only discussing with ourselves. Likewise, we are now discussing with ourselves. When we look outwards, there are so many people, but in whose view do all these people exist? In a dream, there are so many people. Those people seem to be real so long as we're dreaming. Even the person we seem to be in a dream seems to be real so long as we're dreaming. But when we wake up, we realize all the people in our dream, including the person we seem to be, was just our own mental projection.
So if I feel that, how do you feel about that? How do you, the projection of the other person speaking about non-duality, feel about that in my dream?
Okay, if you ask me this question in a dream, I would say, oh, I mean, in a dream, people will respond as they would in waking state. But whatever someone, supposing you were to ask me this in a dream, and I would say, oh, I perceive this world just as you are. I feel just like you feel. When you wake up, how much reality would you attach to my statement that I experienced it all as you do? You would know. But Michael, who you were talking to in your dream, was just your own mental projection.
I would give you credit.
And
I would give both sides equal credit.
Not only the Michael in your dream is a mental projection, even the Ted in your dream is a mental projection.
Yes.
You are
yes.
not Ted. You are not neither Michael nor Ted. Now it seems to you, you're experiencing yourself as I am Ted. But actually, Ted is also an object perceived by you. Ted is an object. You are the subject.
Wow. Thank you very much. I'm glad I did ask that question. Listen, I'm very willing to forego my third and final question because...
No, please do. Please, no.
Okay, I'll ask it quickly.
Yeah. We've got all the time in the world. If we don't finish now, we can continue later.
Well, I want to tell you that this is now the best 2+ hours I've spent in many, many decades, and I really appreciate your clarity. Your knowledge is obvious from the get-go. Because I have spent so many years along this path, I never was a fast learner. I want to point that out. Is it my imagination that so many people are now awakened, or is it an indicator of the global speeding up of perceived awakenings?
The truth is, no person is awakened. There is no such thing as a self. People talk about self-realized people. If we are a person, we are not self-realized. If we are self-realized, we are not a person. So it is said it is said that there are jiva mukta, people who are liberated while alive. But the jiva mukta exists only in the jiva mukta as a person exists only in the view of others, not in the view of the jiva mukta. In the view of the jiva mukta is the jnani is just pure awareness. So sometimes when people used to ask Bhagavan, is such and such a person a jnani? Bhagavan sometimes replied, there is only one jnani, and you are that. So long as we look outwards, we see many people. So even Bhagavan, when we see Bhagavan as a person, we are not seeing Bhagavan as he actually is. Because Bhagavan is not a person. Bhagavan is not the body or mind, but exists in our view. Bhagavan is just pure awareness. So it's from our perspective, it seems that person we call Ramana Maharshi was a jnani. That seems true from our perspective. But if he was a jnani, which I mean, I think we all accept he was a jnani, but then he was not that person. It's only in our view that he seems to be that person.
This begs me to ask a question that's a follow-up to a statement you made about 2 hours ago on this same topic. You said then, more or less, that that the world as we see it, as it goes away, we become self-aware, self-understanding. My question would be then, why then, when people become self-aware, let's use that term, even bother to help others if they no longer exist? So when I'm self-aware and the world dissolves around me, as you suggested 2 hours ago, why would I bother to reach out and help my daughter, my son, my wife?
Okay. Let us consider Bhagavan. According to Bhagavan, in his view, there were no others.
Yes.
But as far as I know, there is no person who has ever walked on this world who is as loving as Bhagavan. Bhagavan loved everyone, whether animals or people, or his love was all embracing. Why did he love everyone? He didn't love us as we think that if we have been with Bhagavan, we would think, oh, Bhagavan is so kind to me, Bhagavan is so loving to me. It would seem to us. We would think that Bhagavan is loving Michael, Bhagavan is loving Ted. But Bhagavan is not loving us as what we mistake ourselves to be. Bhagavan sees us as himself, and he loves us as himself. That is, Bhagavan doesn't see us as other than himself. So because in his view, we are nothing other than himself, he loves us, literally loves us as himself. In the Bible, it is said, love thy neighbor as thyself. But how can we truly love our neighbor as ourselves unless we experience our neighbor as ourselves? So long as we experience our neighbor as someone other than ourselves, we can never truly love them as ourselves. So Bhagavan truly exemplified loving others as oneself, because for him there were no others. So Bhagavan loved us as himself. What is the will of God? What is the will of Bhagavan? Bhagavan has only one will. He wants to be happy. And being happy is just being as one actually is. So because Bhagavan loves us as himself, he wants us to be as himself. Because only when we are as himself, we will be happy. So it's very difficult what I'm talking now, because I'm mixing up duality and non-duality, because I'm trying to explain Bhagavan's view of us from our perspective, which we can never adequately do. But to the best of our ability, we can say, because Bhagavan loved us as himself, he wanted us to be happy as himself. And his love is what manifests in our life as grace. The grace that guided us to come to Bhagavan's path, the grace that is guiding us even before we came to this path, and the grace that is guiding us along this path, that grace is nothing but the love that Bhagavan has for us as himself.
It's a credit to your clarity that I think I understand this as well as I do. I mean,
I'm not sure that I understand it, but I'm trying my best.
Thank you.
We can't adequately understand it, but we can get some inkling. And we can also explain it another way. That is, Bhagavan is not other than ourselves. Bhagavan is our own real nature. So Bhagavan, the love that Bhagavan has for ourselves is the love that we as we actually are have for ourselves as we actually are. So that is why it's our own real nature that has appeared outwardly in the form of Guru, in the form of Bhagavan, to turn us within. It's because of the love that we as we actually are have for ourselves as we actually are, but we have manifested outwardly in the form of Bhagavan to tell us to turn in within.
Great. What a gift.
So for us, it seems that Bhagavan, it seems to us that Bhagavan, but we are all, that in Bhagavan's view, we're other than him. But in his view, we are not other than him. His love is infinite. His love is beyond human. I mean, the only way to understand his love is to merge in it, to lose ourselves in it. That's why.
And when you're talking about his love, you're talking about your love. You're talking about mine.
Exactly. That's why that one of the verses of Aksharamai which appeals to me most is that verse 101, which I quoted earlier. Ambu vilali pol amburu vunilene ātma-vicāra arunachala. Arunachala, like ice in water, melt me as love in you, the form of love. So Bhagavan is the infinite ocean of love, and we are just like an iceberg floating in that ocean. We have to melt and lose ourselves in him. That's what the spiritual path is all about.
Thank you.
So Bhagavan's path is the true path of bhakti, because what is bhakti means love, and what is the highest love is that is, if we love someone, we want to give to that person. If we truly love someone, we're not looking to what we can gain from that person. We are looking to what we can do for that person, what we can give to that person. And the greatest gift we can give is the gift of ourselves. So self-surrender is the pinnacle of the path of bhakti. And that is the path that Bhagavan has taught us, the path of complete self-surrender.
Okay, then from Maureen, this is our last couple of questions. I'll just read her two statements. I'd love to hear what Michael has to say about personal growth, healing our trauma, wounds, shadow work, or as it's sometimes referred to, horizontal growth. Does it matter? And the second part of this is, does it matter when your teacher is supposedly enlightened, but displays behaviors of the negative ego?
Okay, the first question is, does personal growth matter? Yes and no. On this path, we are trying to, our aim is to know ourselves as we actually are. In order to know ourselves as we actually are, we need to distinguish ourselves from the person that we seem to be. So on the path of self-investigation and self-surrender, we are slowly detaching ourselves from the person we seem to be. So we shouldn't be too concerned about this person. We shouldn't be seeking personal growth. But if we are following this path, if we're sincerely following this path, personal growth will take place. That is because we are turning our attention within, we are slowly weaning our mind away from its desires and attachments. We're weakening our Vishaya vasanas. And the more we weaken our Vishaya vasanas, the more we as a person grow, so to speak. So we need not go out to seek to heal our traumas or wounds, or I don't know exactly what shadow, I've heard the term shadow work, but I don't know what it means. But we need not go outwards, I mean, it need not be our aim to heal our traumas and our wounds. But if we are following this path, we will find as we go along that our traumas will naturally be healed without our even being concerned about them. That is, the more we detach ourselves from this person, the more this person will be a well-rounded and a well-developed person. And is it clear what I mean there?
Yes. I should probably specify the kind of trauma work I do as a therapist. It's actually based on Pamela Wilson's inquiry process, and it brings, I do it for myself as well. It's really bringing presence and bypassing the mind and using the body sensations to become totally present and unwinding any resistance to the what is within ourselves, to removing any no's, and it's an allowing process. So it feels like it is in alignment with most of what I'm hearing you saying. It is a way to unwind the ego, because those traumas at their core is shame and fear of that shame. And so as we unwind the shame, I feel freer and less constricted. Then that fear really pulls me back into the outer world and trying to protect and shield or get what I want, avoidance and desire. But trauma mostly creates avoidance or addiction, you know, in terms of a desire. So, yes, you addressed it.
Yeah. So, I mean, these sort of things, these may be beneficial at a certain level, but
Right.
Bhagavan's path is a very, very deep path. And as I say, the fundamental thing is, now we experience ourselves as a person, but this person is not what we actually are. So to the extent to which we separate ourselves from this person, the traumas of this person will automatically be healed, because what feeds the traumas, what gives reality to the traumas, is I who am identifying myself with this person and with this person's experiences, and this person's likes and dislikes and fears and hopes and whatever this person has been through. So the more we manage to detach ourselves from this person, the more that healing process will happen automatically.
I understand. Thank you, Michael.
Right. And your other question was about, doesn't matter if your teacher is supposedly enlightened, but displays behaviors of a negative ego. Many people think that, or an enlightened person can act in any way because they're enlightened, it's all we can't judge them. But I think we cannot know who is enlightened, but I think we can often have a pretty good idea about people who are, about those who are not, certainly not enlightened. That is, anyone who behaves in an egotistical manner, who behaves in an unethical manner, there is still an ego there, and that is not, whatever they may claim about enlightenment, or whatever experiences they may have had. I mean, there are some people who genuinely believe they're enlightened because they've had certain experiences, but they don't know what, that is not enlightened in the sense in which, in the sense of the annihilation of ego, which is the goal that Bhagavan has taught us. So, though we cannot say definitely who is egoless, there are a lot of people who behave in such an egotistical manner. We can have a pretty, it's fairly safe to assume that they are not egoless. So just because someone claimed, there's so many people who claim to be enlightened. We don't have to disrespect them, but I think it's always good to have a healthy degree of skepticism, not just to believe someone just because they claim to be enlightened or because others claim them to be enlightened. If a person is behaving in an inappropriate manner, then even if they are enlightened, it's better we avoid them. It's better that is the true guru, that is, if we see Bhagavan, what a perfect life he lived, how egolessness was evident in so many of his actions. That is why Bhagavan is worthy to be guru for all of us. And anyone who doesn't, I mean, I can only say for myself, I wouldn't be, for me, there couldn't be any guru other than Bhagavan, because I've never seen anyone as perfect as Bhagavan. I'm not saying there aren't others who are enlightened, but Bhagavan right. is something very, very special.
Matter of degrees.
Yes. Yeah. Well, not degrees of enlightenment, but in Bhagavan obviously came with a divine mission. He had a role to play as guru, and so he lived such an exemplary life. That doesn't, but any person who is genuinely enlightened, as I say, it's not really a person who's enlightened, but if a person is egoless, let's say, you will see in their behavior, you will see a certain quality in their behavior. You won't see negative behavior. You won't see egotism. You won't see greed. You won't see jealousy. You won't see so many. Basically you won't see bad qualities in a person who is genuinely egoless.
Thank you.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're busy, but we're here every Sunday, and you're certainly welcome to join us anytime you can. And you've answered all the questions here today. Is like, do we have any last nickels from anybody, or anything that's cropped up that you'd ask to Michael before we leave? Jody?
Just a quick one, Michael.
Yes.
It is. It's something.
Oh, okay. Does an egoless person ever show anger? I know they show strength and firmness and say no appropriately, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
What about anger?
Bhagavan sometimes showed anger, but it was in an appropriate context. When people were acting in an inappropriate manner, sometimes Bhagavan, it was sometimes necessary for Bhagavan to show anger. Just a simple example. There were mango trees in the ashram. Those mango trees were there before the ashram was there. And monkeys used to come and take the mangoes because they were their mangoes before the people had come there. So the people always used to try and drive away the monkeys. Bhagavan said, we have come to their place. They are not stealing from us. We are stealing from them. But sometimes, in order to stop the mangoes being taken by the monkeys, people would beat the trees in order to bring down the mangoes before they were fully ripe. Because if they allow them to ripen on the trees, the monkeys will eat them. So if we knock them down before, we can then ripen them off the tree. And when they beat the branches to get the mangoes down, the leaves and everything falls down. Whenever that happened, Bhagavan used to get very angry. He said, see, these mangoes are giving us nice fruit. Why should you be beating them? And people say, oh, but Bhagavan, if we don't get the mangoes early, the monkeys will come and take them. Bhagavan said, let the monkeys come and take them. They've got as much right to them as we have.
Do you have any? I'm sorry.
I get angry because people were acting in a greedy or a heartless manner. Bhagavan did sometimes get angry.
Do you think he was just setting limits, maybe, and Jesus might have been just setting limits and expressing?
Yeah.
Appropriate, what should be appropriate behavior?
His anger wasn't anger from ego. His anger was for our benefit. If Bhagavan gets angry with us, he's getting angry with us for our benefit.
Sort of like a mother's being angry at a 2-year-old for touching a hot plate.
Exactly. Perfect example.
Thank you. Perfect.
You must be exhausted, but something tells me you're not.
I just love talking about Bhagavan's teachings, so I get energized by talking about Bhagavan's teachings.
I'm so glad you recorded it.
That is, if the talk is harmonious like this, when there's real communication. Obviously, I don't go out and talk to people outside about this because people have to be interested. Only if people ask and are genuinely interested, then it's always refreshing to talk about Bhagavan and his teachings.
Thank you for indulging us.
Well, thank you for indulging me.
Well, thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much.
We'll let you go now, but it's okay to stay in touch with you and invite you back again to visit us sometime?
Yeah, yes.
Maybe we'll be able to stump you one day.
That would be good. Yes, I need to my ego needs to be dampened. So anything you can do, something, I would much appreciated.